Welcome to Pick Up and Deliver, the podcast where I pick up my audio recorder when I go out for a walk and deliver an episode to you while I stroll around. I'm Brendan Riley. Well, good morning, listeners. It is a windy day. Holy cow, there's a coyote. Whoa. I just saw a coyote. Right, I saw something that looked kind of like a dog and kind of like a fox, but it was pretty tall. That's got to be a coyote, right? I'm picking up a stick in case it comes back. Jeez. Well, I'm back. No further sign of the coyote. It ran across the street and through a yard, and I imagine it just kept running. Probably has a forested area somewhere around here it lives in, but I don't know where that would be. Yikes. Well, anyway, threw off my track a little bit there. Well, welcome to Pick Up and Deliver. I hope that you're having a pleasant summer. The heat wave in Chicago has finally broken. It's in the high 60s right now as I'm taking a walk in the early morning of Monday, July 22nd. It looks to be a pretty pleasant day overall. I have a bunch of schoolwork to do today, so that part's not going to be as fun, but I figure if I do a couple hours on it in the morning here, I can do something more fun in the afternoon. At least that's the plan. But before I get into that, I thought I would record an episode for you on this day that feels like it's full of a surprising amount of ambient background noise. There seems to be a lot of machinery going on, which is the permanent state around our place, but also airplanes and cars and all kinds of wind and geez Louise. So just as a heads up, I guess, that there's going to be a noisy morning. Apologies. I am using my makeshift hand shield to cover the lavalier mic so the wind doesn't blow on it directly, but that may be producing other noise. Who knows? I've ended up throwing out this whole episode. If so, you aren't hearing me say this. Okay. Well, it's been a couple weeks since I did an episode about brand new games that I'd played, and so it seems like time to do another one. This weekend was Toggle Top Day, the all-day gaming extravaganza at Dirty Nelly's in Palatine, where we celebrate everything that is Toggle. We estimate we had around 200 people overall throughout the day. At any given time, we had between 60 and 100, but we had a lot of people come for a little while and then leave, and other people show up. So I think 200 is a decent estimate. All sorts of games were played. A couple highlights. We had a tournament of cartographers, which is the new flip and write game, or draw and write game from, I think, flip and write. Draw is confusing because it has multiple meanings. It's a randomized game where you're flipping cards and then writing on a sheet of paper from Thunderworks games, and it's set in the role-player universe. It's pretty good. It has a little bit of player interaction, which is unusual for these games. There are enemy attacks, and when those happen, you pass the sheet to one of your neighbors and they draw on your sheet, kind of get in the way of your plans. So that's an unusual twist. It's an interesting game and one I'd look forward to playing again. But I got to play a few other games as well, two of which I'm including here on this discussion today, and one of which I don't think I've talked about yet on the podcast. If I have, that's going to be embarrassing. Oh well, we'll see. What else? Oh, we also had Artemis Bridge Simulator there, which was a really neat it's like a LAN party, a self-contained LAN party. One player plays the captain, and they don't actually do anything in the computer, but they organize everyone else. And then there's a player who plays the helm. So it's set up around basically you're on the Starship Enterprise. You're flying around doing stuff, mostly blowing up things, which doesn't seem like a great ambassador. But, it is what it is. So yeah, you have a captain who organizes everybody. You have somebody on the helm who steers the ship. You have somebody on weapons who fires the weapons. You have an engineering person who manages power to all these different systems. You have a science person who scans the field and manages information, and then we had that paired with a comms person who does the communications with other places. Some of the different groups have more than others to do so. And then, like I said, there's a captain who kind of manages everything. It was a pretty fun game. My son really liked it. He played several rounds of it. I played it 3 times. And there are some people who didn't play it at all, but they are not as fun as we are. So that's Artemis Bridge Simulator. That's not one of the games I'm talking about, because today's episode is Shooting from the Hip Triple Shot. For those of you new to the podcast, Shooting from the Hip is my early impressions segment in which I've played a game and I kind of highlight things that I think worked or didn't work about the game for me, what my experience was like. I try not to be too reviewy because I design games as well, and I feel like there's a conflict there. But I probably need to just live with the fact that these are basically reviews. But, you know, I think of you listeners as my firm pals, people I share time with and share an interest with. And so I like to talk to you about what interests me the way I would if I was out for a walk with friends. So that's what we're doing today. We're out on a walk with friends. Hello, friends. All right, so, and sometimes I've played a game and it's, for whatever reason, not worth a longer shooting from the hip section where I'm going to give an entire 15 or 20 minutes to it. So instead I do something I call the triple shot, where I talk about 3 games I've recently played kind of in succession and give them each a little bit of an overview or a little bit of mention, just so that if you encounter them sometime, you have a chance to assess them. All right, so I'm going to start with the game that I played first. I'll do these in sort of chronological order. So the first game that I played, this is a while ago now, is the Imperial Settlers Roll and Write. We picked this up at my local game store, Fair Game, here in LaGrange. And the guy who runs, one of the managers at Fair Game, David, had really strongly pushed this one. He said it's a really good roll and write and might help get you interested in some of the other parts of that that line, the other Imperial Settlers games, which I've always stayed away from. The art is cute, but a few years ago I saw the Shut Up and Sit Down review of it, and the way they articulated some of the competitive parts of the game made it seem like it was probably outside of my preferred range of gameplay styles. So I've never really picked up Imperial Settlers. But the Imperial Settlers Roll and Write is a roll and write, and it looked interesting, and my wife actually picked it out, so there it was. When you play, you actually get 2 sheets. You get your kingdom sheet and your village sheet, I guess. I don't even know what they're called. The village sheet has 6 buildings on it, and the kingdom sheet has a whole bunch of resources. It's got different lands connected by bridges, and it's got that's kind of it. And it's got a turn minder. So the way the game works, you roll, whoever is the active player rolls the dice, and then you each take turn picking a boon for the round. There's these cards that have bonuses on them, and there are a different bonus for each player, or there's one more bonus than there are players. So everybody gets a choice, but depending where you are in the turn order, which just rotates normally, you may or may not get a better thing. Then you roll the dice, and those dice give you resources which you can use to check off boxes on your sheet, and you get a certain number of actions, and the action will, basically each action lets you check off one thing. So you can get a variety of different resources or things done based on what you've checked off. So the main sheet is your kingdom, where you are developing things and you're earning points. And then the small sheet is your village, and the village has buildings in it. And this is the sort of key part. The buildings that you build will give you bonuses, which then affect the rest of your game. So for instance, there's an orchard, or a farm, I guess. If you build the farm, then from then on, you have one more apple to use each round. If you build the settlers, there's one called Settlers. If you build that, then anytime that there are 2 dice that have the same result on them, then you get an extra action, that sort of thing. So then you use those checkboxes to open up other lands, which give you more resources, to build these buildings, which give you more actions, and in some cases points. And then at the top, and then to get these achievements, and the achievements both get you points, but they also fill in this grid. And the last thing you do is each round you're allowed to draw 1 building on the grid. When you draw a building, then you get to, that amplifies the effect of the buildings over on your village. So for instance, I said, if you have the settlers building completed, you get 1 extra action when 2 results of the same dice are shown. Well, if you draw one of the settler shapes on your grid, then you get a second extra action every time the 2 dice. So each of these buildings has a shape as well. If you draw that on the grid, then it amplifies the effect of that building that you've built. In addition, the one twist is you're not allowed to change the shape exactly as drawn. So the farm, for instance, is an L shape. You must keep it in an L shape. You can't turn it upside down or flip it over. We've played 3 or 4 games of it so far. It's fine. Not my favorite roll and write. In part because it feels pretty samey. There are only 6 different boons, and you're going to use, or 5 different boons. You're going to use number of players plus 1 boons. So like when you're playing with 4 players, you use all of them. And the board is the same every round. So the only difference is the dice that you're rolling. So it's very much a tactical game, and there are moves that it feels like are necessary early moves. You have to complete the settlers building early, or you're just not going to get enough actions throughout the game to win. That's not necessarily true. My wife won our first game without completing a settlers building, but I think she figured out a different aspect of the points that we didn't figure out, and so I'm not convinced about that. However, it does have a really interesting solo mode in that it comes with a pad, a second building pad that has buildings on it, different buildings than the main sheet did, and then you're supposed to use those for solo play. So the game comes with enough to play 50 solo games, and that seems kind of fun. That said, it's okay. Not my favorite roll and write, but fun, and I'm sure we'll play it a while yet. The next game I want to talk about is Tigris and Euphrates. This is a classic Reiner Knizia game he created in 1997. I guess that he, in 2017, after 20 years, revisited it, looked at the modern landscape, rethought it a bit, and released a new game called Yellow and Yangtze, which is a similar but new version of Tigris and Euphrates. But it is an interesting, if very direct, head-to-head kind of area control game. Now, I lost badly, as did the second of the 3 players. The third player is this guy, Dan, at Toggle, who is known for being a very, very good game player and usually wins when he plays. The challenge, of course, was that I'd never played before and Tony had, and I think Yellow and Yangtze probably suffers some from the San Juan problem in that if you've played a lot, you know a lot more about the strategy than if you haven't. And so I think I was making some blunders that made it harder for Tony to counteract Dan, because I was between Dan and Tony, so I could react to Dan's moves, and often I got in the way of Tony doing something more effective. So, but the game also depends, interestingly, on the tiles you draw. You draw these tiles, and you can use them to battle and to do the other things. And after each player's turn, you redraw. So the game provides motive to spend tiles during these battles. The problem is you can only spend tiles of the color you draw. And we had a number of times where Dan would make a move and he'd spend a bunch of red tiles, and then he would, refill his turn, and he'd get a bunch more red tiles. And the red tiles are sort of the most powerful in some ways. So that wasn't my favorite part of it. There was a heavy luck component to it, although certainly I had no skill. I don't blame luck for my loss, but luck was a significant component in it. So it's an area control game where you're putting out tiles and you have these leaders, And you have four different color leaders, and the color of leader determines what bonus you get. And basically your goal is to get points in all four colors, and you win if you have the most, whatever color you have the least of, that's your score. And just to give you a sense of it, I had like 7 points, I think. Tony had 9 and Dan had 23. So it wasn't close. But it was interesting. I would recommend playing if you get a chance, although it is certainly a very conflict-heavy game. It is not a light, keep your own counsel kind of Euro game. It is a direct conflict, not combat game, but area control game. And like I said, interesting. Probably not a game I would seek out to play too many times, but if someone was setting up and say, hey, you want to give this a try again, I certainly would. That's Tigris and Euphrates from Reiner Knizia. I have no idea if it's still in print. You could also try Yellow and Yangtze. Like I said, that is the newer version of this game that was crafted to be a little nicer, whatever that means. I don't really know anything about that one, except that was the design brief. The third game I want to talk about, I just have a couple minutes because I'm almost home, and that is Incan Gold, or otherwise known as Diamant. This is a push your luck game where the players represent a group of explorers making their way into a temple. The further they go into the temple, the more treasures they find, and each treasure they find, if it can be divided up evenly, it is. If it can't, the remainder is left on the card, and the next person to leave the temple picks up all the treasure on their way out. It's a push your luck game because each time a card is revealed, it shows either a treasure or a danger. If it shows a danger, you're fine, unless we've already seen that danger once before, in which case then everyone who is still in has to forfeit all the treasure they're carrying, rather than making their way out. So it's a game about deciding when to stay and when to go. We played twice, and both games of it that we played, the person who won is somebody who stuck in longer than everyone else once and got a big payout and then quit, and then was able to just coast the rest of the time. And everybody else who tried to do the same in that game lost. It was fun. I wouldn't say it's amazing, but it's a nice filler. It plays 8 really easily. It's not expensive. I think even new it's $15 or $20. My pal found it for $1 at a Goodwill or a thrift store, so we're all jealous of him for that. But yeah, definitely worth trying out if you get a chance and you like push your luck games. That's Incan Gold, or the original version of it was called Diamant. So what have you been playing lately? What new games have crossed your transom? Are you enjoying your summer? This and many more questions can be answered over on the Board Game Geek Guild 3269, the guild for this podcast to pick up and deliver. I hope that you will join us there and answer those questions. Until then, I am Brendan. Thank you for joining me on this walk today, and I hope that your next walk is as pleasant as mine was. Bye-bye.